You're listening to the Never Heard of It podcast,
a Night Shift Radio original. Every week we bring you the good,
the bad,
the weird,
and lesser known streaming movies.
Hit subscribe for new episodes every Thursday and Sunday.
And biggin.
Yes. So, hi, welcome to part 2, where we're going to talk about Miss Marvel. We kind of, this is great. This shows how wonderful Caleb and I are at multitasking, because while we were recording our Thor review, we were messaging each other being like, hey, maybe we should split this into 2 instead of reviewing both in one. And, this probably makes more sense. That way people can watch one or the other. We totally figured that out while we were recording Thor.
We're fucking smart.
Because we are. So if you have,
we're good at this shit.
If you want to hear about our review and our thoughts on Thor 4, Thor Love and Thunder, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Check over on YouTube. For those of you listening on your podcast player of choice, the episode's right there. You can listen to it. It is a spoiler-filled review, as today's review will also be a spoiler-filled review of the entirety of the Miss Marvel series. So, hello and welcome.
Hello. And I gotta say, just right off the bat, I knew that I was going to love a Ms. Marvel show. I knew that because I love that character. And honestly, with the exception of, I'm never going to let this go, with the exception of Multiverse of Madness, Marvel really has not let me down yet, period. Well, since the inception of the MCU. I mean, you can make cases for older stuff, but we don't talk about that.
Right.
But I didn't know how much I was gonna like it, and specifically because I knew going into Hawkeye, like that was one of my favorite characters of recent years, and I was just so excited for that. I'm like, this is gonna be so great. Haley Steinfeld as Hawkeye is gonna be so cool, and it was. And then along comes Ms. Marvel, and holy shit, is this not only like one of the best shows that Marvel has done yet, but also just one of the most wholesome bits of television I've seen in a long time. And it had me cheering and crying and laughing and out of my seat so many times.
So there was a lot of discourse at the beginning of the Miss Marvel series because they changed her powers. So in the comic books, but this is where it gets a little difficult, right? And I kind of understand why they did what they did. However, we'll talk about where maybe that might not be the case. But so we're talking just contained in what we know so far. In the comic books, Kamala Khan is an Inhuman, right? And we know that in the world of the MCU right now, Inhumans don't exist, but kind of do, but don't.
Yeah. Well, and for
they
for
didn't,
people who may not
and then they did, and then they don't.
For people who may not be familiar, and I might get some of this wrong because it's been a while and I really wasn't following at the time, but essentially there was the whole hullabaloo, largely between, I think, Fox and Marvel because of like the X-Men franchise and whatnot, about the term mutant. And that spilled over into the comics, which was really unfortunate because mutants were such a huge part of the comics. And I mean, X-Men, like everyone fucking knows the X-Men.
The Children of the Atom. That was what started, I would arguably say, the best Marvel comics is X-Men, Spider-Man. Yeah.
Yeah. And like a lot of what Marvel has done over the years has been based off of characters being mutants or like having some association with them, whether it be pro, anti, etc. And so like, well, we can't give up our superheroes. We can't like not have new heroes, but we can't really use these existing ones. There's weird things going on, legal battles and whatnot. So Marvel says, I know, Mr. Marvel, I don't know who actually made the decisions. George Marvel sat down at his desk one day. He said, you know what? Make them inhuman. They're like mutants, but they're not. It's a mist. There's a mist that touches them and it turns them into Inhumans, and they're not mutants, so we can do whatever we want with them. And the mist also kills the mutants, and that's how we get rid of them. And it's a fucking mess. I actually honestly, I didn't care for it. I thought like Marvel really just fucking just diarrheaed all over the pages for several years with that nonsense. And I'm glad that it's over, and I'm glad that they're not doing that in the MCU. But Kamala Khan was an Inhuman in the comics, and they had to do something about that for the MCU. And I loved that when they introduce her in this show and like introduce her having powers, they make it more of a mystical, maybe it's magic, maybe it's alien tech, we don't know. And like kind of
Up until the end.
Until the very end.
Yeah. Well, so this is the thing. So we talked a little bit about this in our last episode, but in the TV world, before everything really culminated, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. introduced Inhumans, right? So we have Daisy Johnson, played by Chloe Bennett, which rumor is she's coming back, by the way, to play Daisy Johnson in Quake, in this. So that's going to be really exciting. So supposedly she is coming back. But so we had the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. They introduced the Terrigen Mist and Terrigen Crystal, which created the Inhumans. They did the whole Black Bolt, they did the whole Inhuman storyline. And then they did, Marvel and Fox basically made an Inhumans show, and it was terrible and nobody watched it. And it literally was laughed out of existence during that time. So we had Inhumans in the MCU for a minute, but then Doctor Strange technically brought them back when we meet the Illuminati and we learned that Black Bolt, who was the Inhuman King or whatever they refer to him as, they use the term Inhuman for him. So that says that in one of these universes, the Inhumans exist. And now
that is the benefit of them leaning into a multiverse story, is that gives them the chance that if they decide later on that they want to play more with those characters, they can, because, they're from universe like 713.
Yeah, right. Like they can just say it's whatever. And now
Universe 8.
And now enters Miss Marvel. So again, in the comics, Miss Marvel is a huge Captain Marvel fan. And she comes in contact with a Terrigen Mist and gets her powers. Now in the comics, her powers are she can embiggen. She can basically, very similar to Reed Richards, she can expand her body and do that. But unlike Reed Richards, the bigger she gets, it does expand her strength. So she can pick up a whole tank. Whereas I don't think Reed Richards did it that way, but I don't exactly know.
I imagine some writer probably took some liberties and made him super strong too, but I don't think Reed Richards is supposed to be canonically super strong.
Yeah. But so, obviously enter the Miss Marvel show. And, in the beginning, same thing. She's a huge Captain Marvel fan. And what it is she actually ends up getting a bracelet that she inherits from her family that gives her these sort of crystal powers. So she can throw
it hard light.
Yeah, call it hard light. Destiny reference for you guys listening. So she can basically throw out these hard light crystals that she can jump on. She can use them as shields. And in the end of the series, we do actually see her embiggen by basically increasing her mass with the crystals and making her really big with them.
Well, and one of the most iconic images of her from the comics is stretching her hand into a giant fist and using it to punch bad guys like fucking Battletoads style.
Yeah.
And the very first time she does that in this show, when I tell you I jumped out of my chair and yelled, I am not shitting you. I was like, "Dang, she did it!"
She did the thing. Yeah, so here's the thing. Miss Marvel hit a couple of different ways for me. One, it hit as, and I saw a lot of people criticizing Miss Marvel where they were like, it felt like a Disney show. And I was like, well, technically it is a Disney show, but I know what you mean.
Yes.
Yes, I know what you mean, but technically it is. And yeah, I saw somebody say it's Lizzie McGuire with powers. And I was like, yeah, but is that bad though? Lizzie McGuire was a hugely popular show. It fits the persona of this super fan of Miss Marvel. It fits her character. I think it worked as a theme.
Well, so here's the thing. She's a high school student.
Right.
She's a total Captain Marvel fangirl. She has this very, very close-knit, wholesome family, very close ties with her friends, family, with her extended family, with her community. And what you have to remember about this show is that it really is much about those ties of family and community and friendship, and just this overarching theme of love for one another. as much, if not more so, than it is about a girl with superpowers. And then you take the into account that, like, yes, she is a young kid who just figured out, like, oh, I've got powers. What do I do now? And without that support structure, I mean, we know that story. That's Peter Parker.
Yeah.
Peter Parker's a high school student with no fucking support structure that suddenly finds himself a superhero, and life's a mess for him. And of course, in the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, he's got a couple of close friends who knew, but he's lost that recently.
Yeah.
So he is well and truly on his own. Kamala Khan is the exact opposite. Kamala Khan has her entire support network in place because of the love and the trust that she has with these people, and we even see, like, when they find out, there's a little bit of like, why wouldn't you tell me? Because we tell each other everything. And, like,
yeah,
you see that, like, it's not like you betrayed me. It's like, but, like, seriously, like, how did you think that I would not be there for you? And, like, everyone is like that. Her mom, her dad, her brother, her sister-in-law, her friends, like, everyone is like that. And it's just, that's why I say this is one of the most wholesome shows. And, like, the number of times I teared up just at, like, how great her family is. I loved it. And when we see, like, the interactions, like, with her mosque, the sheikh and the other people at the mosque, the way that they band together to protect each other, and we get a lot of this post 9/11 anti-Muslim, anti-Arab racism that is still rampant here.
Yeah.
We see that with the government agencies trying to raid the mosque, and the people are like,
no,
please take your shoes off.
Yeah, here, have some cookies. Oh,
have some cookies.
We all have our ID ready. Here it is.
And, like, let us know when you have, like, this exact correct type of warrant. You come back, and, like, they're not like, it's not like we're gonna fight you. It's just like, no, we know you can't.
We know
do
the drill.
This.
Yeah.
So, like, come back when you do it right.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting because a lot of the times when we have kids superheroes, or even as up as, like, in the early 20s, where everyone's like, everything has to be protected, like, no one can know, and Miss Marvel starts off that way. Obviously she tells her best friend Bruno, her friend Nakia finds out, but in the end, everybody knows who she is. Like, her mom knows who she is. Her dad knows who she is. We learned that, like, her whole family has a history of, which I thought they were going to go a different way. I thought they were going to go the Eternals way, but they ended up going the Jinn way, which was really weird. But I'm with it. But I thought they were going to be like, oh, well, we're Eternals. And I was going to be like, oh, that makes perfect sense then, but they didn't. I was like, kind of missed opportunity, but I'm glad they didn't.
But okay, so in our part one of this, when we talked about Thor, we were talking about the larger the story being told in Phase 4, and, like, does it feel cohesive or not? And I said that, like, if you zoom out really, really high, you're going to see it start to come together. But right now, the only real clues that we have are in these smaller stories being told in the TV shows. And the reason I say, like, here we have, like, Kamala Khan's grandmother or great grandmother.
Yeah.
We learn is of another universe. So there's multiverse. Okay. We have another connection to the multiverse story here.
Yep.
They're Jinn, which, to the people of Earth 616.
We're technically Earth 616. Although, very fun fact, the girl who plays Miss Marvel actually argues that fact with Kevin Feige and says we can't be 616, and I think that's hilarious because she's no, because
we can't be, because there are no superheroes here.
Yeah, well, she means we, as in the world that she's in. She actually argues that Miss Marvel is not 616.
Okay. See, that's also very interesting.
Yeah.
But, like, okay, so, like, the people we'll assume that it's 616 until we're told otherwise. To them, the Jinn are at best spiritual entities. At worst, they're, like, demonic. They're aggressively evil. So we have, like, that's getting us a little bit more into gods and demons territory. Oh, well, we know that gods exist. Because we just spent a whole movie with Thor talking about them, as well as other times that we mentioned in part one of this. And so, like, we start to see, like, there are these cosmic connections. There are other universes. There are other beings. There are beings with other powers that aren't necessarily superheroes. And like there's these little threads that are being kind of woven together that I think are taking us in the right direction. And it's stuff like that. It's her not being, her lineage not being from this universe.
Yeah.
That I think is a big part of what ties that in.
So in the very last episode, we kind of been getting the hint of this throughout the whole series, but it's been mentioned before several times about everybody. But basically, they were like, "Yeah, it's the bracelet, but it's not just the bracelet. Like it's not just the bracelet." And we kind of get hints, and then in the very last episode, Bruno, her best friend, her guy in the van, right? If we're going to quote Spider-Man, her guy in the van is basically like, "Hey, like I've been kind of looking at your blood samples, like since all of this happened." And he's like, your genetics aren't the same. Like they are not like regular people's. Like there's just something else there. So my question is it the Inhuman gene or is it the mutant gene? I think it's the mutant gene.
I mean, I think this was a very careful choice of words. He says there's something different about your genetics. It's like a mutation.
Yes, it was that word that I was like, okay, like that's it. We introduced the Children of the Atom. Like we just introduced X-Men. Like that's
X-Men are back, baby.
Right. That's where we're at. Right. Like
it's fucking. I mean, like, and like Multiverse of Madness, for all of its flaws, all of its many flaws, proved to us definitively that the X-Men exist.
The X-Men exist. Yeah.
Because they gave us Charles Xavier.
Yeah.
And we know that other people who have acquired powers through various ways also exist. So like they're setting up for all these people to be able to exist in the same world. And they've left themselves open to the possibility that they can bring back the Inhumans. I don't think they will. I think Marvel
really don't.
recognizes that the Inhumans is not their shining moment in the comics or on screen. And I don't think that they'll bring them back. If they do it right, I'd be fine with being wrong with that. I just don't think.
I just don't think they can.
I think they're going to lean into like Kamala is, other than Professor X, Kamala is the first true mutant that we meet, and that sets us up for like, okay, like who else is out there? And
right.
if there are mutants, then there's going to be X-Men, which gives us the potential for any of the offshoots of X-Men, so Excalibur, X-Force, X-Factor, etc.
Yep.
The Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. We can have, maybe like a real like actual Magneto storyline, and not just like a really good British actor just pontificating for a while floating.
Yeah, this also begs the question too, because we know that in the Deadpool movies, that they imply that that mutants exist, right? Because Wade Wilson, they're forcing the activation of his mutant gene, of the Gene X.
Yeah, I mean, Wade Wilson is a mutant. Colossus is.
Well, I mean, we have the whole X-Men comics. Yeah,
and we have who is the teenage fucking
Negasonic Teenage Warhead.
Negasonic Teenage Warhead.
What the shit? Coolest name ever. But we know that Deadpool 3 is happening, and it will take place in the greater Marvel universe. So we know that that's a fact as well. So we know that unless they retcon that, mutants exist in that world, because Colossus is a main part of the Deadpool world now, from Deadpool 1 and Deadpool 2. So,
which is great. I love that of all the characters they could have chosen,
they chose Colossus.
It was fucking Peter.
Yeah. Which I'm really excited about for Deadpool 3, because it's Sean Levy that is doing it. And I'm really excited. So if you're unfamiliar, Sean Levy directed Ryan Reynolds in The Atom Project, and he also directed Ryan Reynolds in Free Guy. But more recently and more notably, Sean Levy is and has been one of the directors of Stranger Things. And more specifically, Sean Levy directed the Dear Billy episode, which is arguably one of the best of this past season.
Oh, my God, yeah.
Sean Levy, man, I am all in. Anytime Sean Levy's attached to something, I'm like, let's go. Like, to me, that's the equivalent of like Taika Waititi. If someone's like, oh, he's directing, and be like, I'm in, sight unseen. Like, I don't even need to see a trailer. I will go see that day one.
So, and that's presumably, like, if all goes according to schedule, that's next year. Although it's not technically part of MCU Phase 4. So it's going to be like presumably. So do you think with like Marvel and Sony and Fox, well, Marvel owning Fox now and like Sony consistently failing, do you think we'll start to see more like one-offs that are adjacent to but not necessarily part of the MCU?
I think we'll see it in the sense of how we've seen the movies so far of Phase 4, where like they'll be there and maybe in passing be like, oh yeah, like when the Avengers did blah, and then carry on their business. And maybe we don't necessarily like, and now I'm going to go to Tony Stark's grave. Like, I don't think it'll be like that, but I do think they'll be like, oh yeah, well down the road, Spider-Man's over there. I actually saw a really funny thing online where someone was like, the way they should introduce mutants into in the MCU is have Deadpool like drag the X-Men from like the Fox folder to like an MCU folder, like a Disney folder, and like copy paste, and they'd be like mutants. I think that would be hilarious.
Oh my God. Even if that isn't like how the MCU canonically did it, if Deadpool did that anyway, they could get away with it.
They could just get away with it. It'd be so
Deadpool
funny.
team could absolutely get away with that, and it'd be fucking hilarious.
Because he's gonna make jokes of like, what number universe am I in again? Like it's gonna be great. So, anyways, we're gonna go back to Miss Marvel. I want to very specifically talk about the post credit scene of the season finale, because I think that is probably the most we saw for 6 episodes the story building arc of Miss Marvel of basically building the hero, right? Just like we saw with Kate Bishop, just like we saw when Falcon became Captain America, just like we saw with Loki. Like, this is the character building moment to a pinnacle that will pay off in the films. So throughout the series, we learned that her bracelet is of mystical origin, right? It is emanating power, giving her power, and it's kind of doing things on its own at one point. At one point, somebody goes to stab it and it kind of activates on its own. Many moments it kind of glows on its own. When she goes back in time and ends up saving her own grandma, it kind of activates on its own. So we know that it has its sort of mystical origin. So in the very end of the series, in a post-credit scene, Miss Marvel is there. She's getting dressed and getting ready to go, and her bracelet activates all on its own. And she's like, what is happening? And it's glowing and fluctuating. And then woof, she gets thrown, seemingly through her closet door.
Well, it almost looks like she gets like whipped through like a dimensional portal or something. Like she seems to kind of like, I don't want to make this reference, but it's the first one that comes to mind. The visual effect used for apparating in the Harry Potter movies,
100%,
like almost implode and disappear.
Yep.
And so like she kind of like swirls and like whips backwards through the closet, but like it implies that she's gone now, and like that makes me wonder, like, what the fuck happened?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. So that happens. And out from the closet walks none other than Brie Larson as Captain Marvel, which that was my big stand-up jump-up moment where I was like, what? Oh, we did the thing. You did the thing. Because I predicted that we were not going to see Captain Marvel in the series. I thought we were going to get in one of two ways. Either it was going to be like a text message, a phone call, or like we just see her from like the chest down, like, float into screen, but it's not actually Brie Larson. I made the reference on Twitter of like how we got Superman and Shazam, where it wasn't really. That's what I thought was going to happen. And then when Brie Larson actually stood up out of the closet and spoke, I was like, yo, like it is happening right now.
Like that was so great too, because I mean, like the first thing she sees as she's trying to figure out where the fuck she is, is that this room is covered with like posters and drawings and memorabilia of her.
Yeah.
And like Captain Marvel is not one that's going to be like, that I should say, she's not one who's not going to be taken aback by someone hero worshiping her. Like that's gonna totally throw her. And she's like, "What the fuck? No,
Yeah, she was like, "Oh, no,
something's
no."
wrong.
So I think the implication is that they swapped places, right? Is that
that's what it looks like.
Yeah, that Miss Marvel goes to wherever Captain Marvel was, and Captain Marvel is now back on Earth in this world where we know it's a world that she exists in because, you know, she's there. Literally, it's a poster of Brie Larson on the wall. And she's just like, "Oh, no, 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 no."
We're at the point in universe in the MCU. We're at the point where like superheroes are being like basically marketed. And
Yeah.
I love that not because I actually love it, but because it feels so realistic. Like, if we had real superheroes in our timeline, there would be merchandise.
When we got introduced to that actually during Endgame, during Infinity War, when Tony Stark meets Doctor Strange, and he's like, "Oh, well, a hunk of Hulk burning fudge is our favorite ice cream." And he's like, "What?" He's like, "Isn't there a Tony Stark?" He's like, "Yeah, but it's Hulk. The Hulk ice cream is better." And I just think that's great because that is exactly like Ben and Jerry's would absolutely make a flavor about the Avengers, as they should. Earth's mightiest heroes. So we know
Earth's mightiest flavors.
So we know that now Miss Marvel is now part of the large universe. We know that the next time, in fact, at the very, after that scene, it says Miss Marvel will return in the Marvels. So we know that she is going to be in the film world. And we now have a general idea of the plot. And the plot is that Captain Marvel and Miss Marvel have swapped cosmic places, whatever that means, wherever, if that means she was in another, she probably wasn't in another dimension, but she was definitely on another planet. So now we know that Miss Marvel is somewhere else and Captain Marvel is now stuck in Jersey City, which I'll be honest, not a good place to be. No. Not a fan. Not a fan.
No. According to Coheed and Cambria, the devil's in Jersey City.
The devil is in Jersey City. Yeah. According to an X-Files episode as well.
That's probably where it came from.
Yeah.
If they're referring to the Jersey Devil, I was terrified of the Jersey Devil as a kid because I read about it in a book.
Yeah, see, I wasn't, because my first instance of the Jersey Devil was the X-Files episode where it was actually more of like a Sasquatch and less of a devil. And I was like, well, this isn't scary at all. It's just some hairy person. That was the Jersey Devil.
Oh, man.
Yeah, season 1, episode 4, X-Files.
I think that's actually the next one up. I started rewatching the show.
So did I.
But it was like, one episode at a time late at night. So it's been a while.
Yeah.
But I think that one is next up. But yeah, so we think we know that Kamala and Carol have switched places. Obviously, like Carol has control of powers that will help her get back to wherever she was.
Sure.
But Kamala is on her own, presumably. But we also know that Monica Rambeau comes back, which is dope.
Yes. Which we learned in WandaVision, that Monica Rambeau. And that was another instance where they basically introduced the potential of an X gene, where they basically were like, they say to Monica, they say to her specifically, like, this didn't give you powers. It basically turned on something you already had. Like they say, like, we looked at your DNA, like this turned on something that already existed. It activated a dormant gene in your body. And that's what it's been doing. And this is where we get the Wanda, House of M style creating mutants.
Yeah. Which I am hoping, so given that we know that X-Men now can exist in this universe, and given how well Marvel has done with introducing young actors and like creating, basically creating characters, like recreating characters from the ground up because they're existing characters.
Sure.
For television and film, recreating these characters ground up, giving them a new story, giving them new powers when necessary, and fitting them into this cohesive whole. I want to see just scrap everything you think you know about the existing X-Men film universe for whatever you think of those movies. Just fucking forget them. Start over with young Jean, Scott, Hank,
right? Iceman, Bobby,
and,
like Angel.
Angel, yep. Like just give it, those original 5.
Yeah, X-Men Blue. Yep.
Yeah, and like build from there, and like give us a chance where we can see like, okay, like once you've established that team, okay, give us a reason why Xavier continues the search, and we meet Logan and Storm and like all these other characters from the secondary squad that comes later on, who in the 90s becomes the X-Men Gold, and like there's so much potential there to dip into these stories, but like give us these characters fresh. Don't try to drop a fucking like 45-year-old fucking burnout, like jaded, mad at the world Scott Summers on us with no context. Don't give us another James Marsden and Famke Janssen. Like, no offense to those actors, but like, don't give us that again.
Yeah, I mean, I think they know better now. Hopefully, I think it's going to be very interesting how they introduce the X-Men. There's a lot of theories that Ant-Man and Quantumania, Loki season 2 is filming right now, that they're going to kind of merge multi-dimensions and they'll just exist with ours because they existed before.
So, and we might have touched on this recently. I get a lot of this mixed up because, brain. But one of the interesting, but in a mostly bad and weird way, things that Marvel did when the whole Inhuman saga was going on is the X-Men had gotten to the point where like Scott Summers was full on villain. Like Scott Summers was like the baddie of the Marvel Universe for a while, it seemed like. And they wanted to keep telling original X-Men stories. So they actually brought the original First Class X-Men like from the 60s forward in time to modern time, side by side with the existing ones. We know multiverses exist. We know time travel is a thing in this universe. And we know that X-Men exists. So they could do something like that where they don't have to drop us into your regularly scheduled program already in progress with X-Men. They can give us a like full start fresh reboot, but still say that they existed back in the 60s and bring them forward. We don't have to go back in time like First Class did, which I do think the way that the First Class not reboots, but
other entries into the story.
Whatever you want to call that second round of X-Men movies, the First Class storyline. I liked the way that they handled the passage of time with each of those movies, but I think you can just skip that. And like if you want to say that they're like full like Children of the Atom like 60s superheroes.
See, I don't think they could do 60s though, because that is now 70 years ago in the current time frame of the MCU, because we're in 2026 right now in MCU.
Essentially what they would have to do is just like they'd have to get pulled out of some other alternate timeline or alternate reality where like the X-Men were forming in that time period, but like suddenly they find themselves here, and like what do they do? They could do that. I'm not saying that I want them to.
I think they just started in the 90s. I think they just started in the 90s and insert other dimension, smash dimensions together. Now they exist in 616 and everyone just knew they existed and call it a day, and everything happened in the 90s. Actually, there was a really good case of someone saying that instead of Magneto being a Holocaust survivor, that they could make him Armenian and have him be part of the Armenian genocide survivor instead. I mean, which would be awesome to see Magneto as something more.
Pick a global conflict and you can tell that story. Like that's not difficult. You can set that in pretty much any time period in human history, and
find
they have.
I mean, not to say that the Holocaust part was is anything played, but like timeline wise, it wouldn't make sense because Magneto would be 100 years old almost by the time he exists now. Like it just doesn't make sense for him to exist if he's a Holocaust. It has to be later.
So while I say that they could do a thing with like time travel or dimensional displacement or whatnot, what I actually think that they should do is just like, okay, like the X gene is starting to appear, and like maybe Xavier has known about it for a while because he was maybe one of the first, but like now he's starting to sense others and starts to gather them up and forms his first class of X-Men.
I think
that they can just tell that story right here and now in the 2020s. I don't think they have to play with time or multiverse or anything at all to do it. All of that said, I am really curious to see how, and I hope it's good. I do still love the X-Men. It's one of the fucking corniest franchises.
X-Men is my favorite.
History. but I love it. I love it so much.
Yeah. So what do you guys think? Is Miss Marvel going to be an Inhuman, or is she going to be a mutant? We want to hear from you. So if you're listening to this on your podcast player of choice, all of our contact information is down below. Tweet at us. Let us know. Is Miss Marvel going to be an Inhuman, or do you think they're going to go the mutant route? And for those of you watching on YouTube, comment down below. Is she going to be Inhuman, or is she going to be a mutant? Where are we going to go? Or is there a weird third option that we're not seeing? We want to know. Let us know. Hey, thanks a lot for listening, everyone. We super appreciate it. Stick around. Make sure to hit that subscribe button everywhere. We have brand new episodes all the time, every Thursday and Sunday. Thursday drops on both podcast players and YouTube, and Sunday is our brand new movie review episodes over on our on whatever podcast player you like to listen to people on. Yeah. So definitely check it out and listen to us. We super appreciate it. And as always, everyone, share with 100,000 of your closest friends.
It's just like one phone call to the multiverse and you're done.
It's that easy. All right. Thanks a lot.
Just dial up your multiversal group text
and beep boop up and beep boop it out there.
Beep boop it right out there.
All right. Thanks a lot for listening, everyone, and watching. We will see you next time.